Tonight it's just you and me, out here under the stars, the forest stretching out in every direction. Beyond this small, flickering circle of light, the dark is ever, thick, alive. But we're safe here, at least, I think we are. Because out there, in those shadows, there are things people don't talk about. Things they hear, things they see, things that follow. So lean in closer, listen carefully, because tonight I'm going to tell you some stories. Stories of people who wandered a little too far into the woods and met something they couldn't explain. But don't worry, we're safe, as long as the fire keeps burning. Ready? Let's begin. I was 3 days into a week-long hiking trip when I found the campsite. It wasn't marked on my map, just a flat patch of ground, a ring of stones where someone had clearly built a fire, and a pile of empty cans and crumpled cigarette packs scattered around. Whoever had been there hadn't cleaned up after themselves, but that wasn't what bothered me. What bothered me was that the fire was still smouldering. I crouched next to it, holding my hand above the ashes. They were warm. Whoever had been here had left recently, maybe just an hour or two ago. I looked around. The trees stretched tall and close, their branches so thick they blotted out the sky. The air was heavy and still, the kind of stillness that makes your ears ring. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. You hear stories about people going missing in the woods, about hermits or squatters setting up makeshift camps, but you never really expect to run into one. I threw some dirt over the fire, kicked the cans into a pile, and moved on. But as soon as I started down the trail again, I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder. Every few steps, I'd catch myself glancing back, expecting to see someone standing there just behind the trees. But the path was always empty. An hour passed, then two. The sun was sinking, the sky bleeding orange and purple through the branches. I kept moving, forcing myself to keep my eyes forward, even as the feeling of being watched pressed in, closer and closer. And then I heard a twig snapping. Not a squirrel or a deer, it was too deliberate, too heavy. I stopped, holding my breath, straining to hear. Nothing. The trees were silent. I shook my head, telling myself it was just my imagination, and kept walking. But a few minutes later, I heard it again. Closer this time. Another snap, then another. Slow, methodical. Like someone was pacing just off the trail, keeping pace with me. I spun around. Nothing. Just trees, just shadows. But the shadows felt wrong. They were too dark, too deep. I forced myself to keep moving, walking faster now, my boots crunching against the dirt, every step echoing through the woods. That's when I saw it. Up ahead, right in the middle of the trail, there was something hanging from a low branch. A piece of red cloth, torn and frayed, fluttering in the wind. I stopped, staring at it. I didn't remember seeing it when I came through earlier. I would have noticed it, bright red against all that green and brown. I stepped closer, reaching out to touch it. The fabric was damp, smeared with something dark and sticky. I pulled my hand back, my fingers trembling. That's when I heard the whistle. A long, low drawn-out whistle, echoing through the trees. The kind of whistle people use to call their dogs, or to get someone's attention. My blood ran cold. I took a step back, glancing around, but the trees were too thick, the branches too tangled. I couldn't see anyone, but I could feel them, watching me. I turned and started walking, faster now, almost jogging. The whistle sounded again, closer this time, and behind it, I thought I heard something else. Footsteps, crunching through the underbrush, just off the trail, matching my pace. I didn't look back. I just kept moving, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps, the trees blurring as I broke into a full run. The footsteps kept pace, faster now, closer. I could hear them crashing through the brush, hear branches snapping and leaves rustling. Someone was running after me. I tore through the trees, barely able to see, barely able to think. The trail was gone, the trees too thick, the ground uneven. My foot caught on something, and I went down hard, the air rushing from my lungs. For a second, everything went silent. Then, the footsteps stopped. I lay there, face down in the dirt, trying to catch my breath, trying not to sob. I could hear them breathing, whoever it was, they were close. I forced myself to look up, and that's when I saw them. 3 figures, standing in the trees. Their faces were covered in mud, streaked black and brown, their clothes torn and filthy. They were just standing there, perfectly still, perfectly silent. And they were all staring right at me. One of them lifted his hand, the skin caked with dirt and scratches, and pointed at me. Just pointed. Then he smiled. I scrambled to my feet and ran. I didn't care where I was going, just away from them, away from those eyes, away from that smile. Branches clawed at my arms, roots snagged my ankles, but I kept running, my legs burning, my lungs screaming. I didn't stop until I burst out onto the main trail, nearly crashing into a group of campers. They asked if I was okay, asked why I was covered in dirt, why my eyes were wild, why I couldn't speak. I didn't know what to tell them, didn't know how to explain what I'd seen, what I'd heard. When they walked me back to the trailhead, I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see those figures standing there in the trees, just watching me. But they were gone. When I got back to the ranger station, I told them everything. The campsite, the red cloth, the whistle, the figures. The ranger nodded, his expression grim. "You're not the first one," he said. "What do you mean?" "People see them sometimes," he said. "The watchers. They don't speak, they don't follow, they just stand there, watching." I swallowed. But why? What do they want? The ranger shook his head. No one knows. No one wants to. I was hiking through black pines, a stretch of dense forest that runs for miles, untouched by any nearby towns. My brother and I had planned the trip for weeks, but he bailed last minute, so I decided to go alone. Bad decision. The first day was fine. The trees were thick, the kind that swallow up sound and light. The trail was well marked and easy to follow. I set up camp in a small clearing and fell asleep, listening to the wind rustling through the branches. The second day, the wind stopped. I woke up to silence. Not the normal forest quiet, but a heavy, suffocating stillness. No birds, no insects, not even a breeze. Just the kind of silence that presses in on you, makes your ears ring. I packed up quickly and decided to move. The air felt cold, like the temperature had dropped to 10 degrees overnight. My breath fogged in front of me, and every step seemed to echo, too loud against the quiet. After a few hours, I started to notice something strange. The trees around me, they all looked the same. Same twisted branches, same patches of moss. It was like I was walking in circles, but the trail was still marked. Every so often, I'd pass a tree with a red slash printed on it, a marker to keep the hikers from getting lost. But I kept seeing the same marker, over and over. I stopped, staring at the latest one. It looked fresher, the paint glistening, wet and bright, but I hadn't heard anyone else on the trail. No hikers, no rangers, just me. A shiver ran down my spine. I turned in a slow circle, scanning the trees, half expecting to see someone standing there. Nothing. I pushed forward, faster now. The air felt colder still, the silence thicker. My hands shook as I checked my phone, but there was no signal. Just that spinning icon, like it was searching for something it would never find. That's when I noticed the smell. Faint at first, something rotten that lingered in the back of my throat. I couldn't tell where it was coming from, but the further I walked, the stronger it got. And then I saw the tent. It was off the trail, tucked back in a cluster of trees, faded green, sagging in the middle, with the zipper half open and flapping in the still air. The smell was stronger there, thick and cloying, making my eyes water. The tent looked abandoned, the fabric torn in places, streaked with something dark and dried. "Hello," I called out. No answer. I crouched down and reached for the zipper. It was cold, like it had been sitting in a freezer. I pulled it up slowly, wincing as the sound echoed through the trees. Inside was a sleeping bag, open, tangled, and something else. A shirt, a man's shirt, white but stained dark in places, and a backpack with a patch sewn on. A red and yellow sun, the same patch I'd seen on a hiker 3 days ago when I'd first set out. He'd passed me on the trail, waved, said he was going to camp out for a few days. He'd been alone. I swallowed hard, glancing around again, that uneasy feeling gnawing at me, growing sharper. And that's when I saw them. Footprints, deep, heavy prints in the mud, circling the tent. They weren't mine. The prints were long, longer than any shoe I'd ever seen, and they were spaced far apart, like whoever, or whatever, made them had been moving fast, too fast. They led away from the tent, deeper into the woods, where the trees grew even closer together, and in the distance, just at the edge of where the trees swallowed up the last bit of light, I thought I saw movement. Something big, something tall, something that shouldn't have been moving the way it did. I backed away, my skin prickling, every instinct screaming at me to run. But then, the air changed. The smell was stronger now, so strong I could taste it on my tongue. And underneath it was another smell, coppery, sharp. I turned around and froze. There was a shape, just beyond the trees, tall, almost impossibly tall, with limbs too long, fingers that stretched past its knees. Its skin was dark, mottled, blending with the bark and the shadows, and it was standing perfectly still, watching me. I couldn't see its face, just a glint of eyes, wide and black, set deep in a hollow, too deep for a human. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, just stood there, staring at me. I stepped back and stood on a branch. The thing's head jerked forward, like a dog that's just heard a sound. I stumbled and nearly fell, but forced myself to keep moving, walking backwards, never taking my eyes off it. The thing stayed where it was, but its head kept tilting, its eyes following me as I moved. And as I finally turned around and started to run, I heard it, a low, deep, clicking sound, like teeth clacking together, fast, over and over. The noise echoed through the trees, getting louder and louder, until it was all I could hear, until it felt like it was right behind me. I ran as fast as I could and didn't stop. I didn't look back. By the time I made it back to the main trail, the sun was almost gone. The trees were black against the sky, and the clicking sound had stopped. But the smell was still there. I could still taste it, thick and sickly, sticking to the back of my throat. And I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever that thing was, it had followed me. was halfway through a 2-day solo hike when I found the hollow. It was one of those unmarked, overgrown parts of the woods that you'd only stumble across by accident. The kind of place that doesn't show up on any map. The trail had narrowed to almost nothing, just a vague line of flattened grass and broken branches leading down into a shallow dip between the trees. Something about it felt wrong. The trees around the hollow were twisted, the branches gnarled and heavy, leaning toward each other like they were conspiring. The air was cooler there, damp and still. No wind, no birds, just silence. I should have kept going, but the longer I stood there, the more I felt like the hollow was waiting. I told myself it was just the woods playing tricks on me. Sometimes they can make you think like you're being watched. But I was stupid, and I was curious, so I stepped off the trail and into the hollow. The ground was soft, almost spongy. The dirt was wet enough to suck at my boots. The trees pressed in tight, their branches tangled overhead, blocking out most of the light. That's when I saw a man. He was sitting against one of the trees, his knees pulled up to his chest, his head bowed. His clothes were dirty, layers of mismatched flannel and torn jeans, all streaked with mud. His hair was long, hanging down to his shoulders. I stopped dead. He hadn't moved, hadn't even lifted his head. "Hey," I said, my voice too loud in the stillness. "Are you okay?" He didn't say anything. I took a step closer. "Are you hurt?" I asked. Nothing again. I squinted, trying to get a better look at his face. The way his hair hung down made it hard to tell if he was even conscious. But then I noticed his hands. They were wrapped tight around his shins, the fingers digging in like claws, and his whole body was shaking. "Hey," I said again, softer this time. "Are you lost?" Still nothing, just that awful, silent shaking. I swallowed, my throat so dry. "Do you need me to get some help?" Then he lifted his head. His hair fell away from his face, and for a second, I wished he'd kept it down. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, with dark circles like bruises smeared underneath. His skin was pale, almost grey, and his lips were chapped, split in a few places. He was staring at me, but it was like he was looking through me. "They're coming," he said. My stomach dropped. "Who's coming?" He didn't answer, just kept staring at me, his pupils too wide, like he'd been sitting in the dark for too long. Then he leaned forward, his hands uncurling from his legs, and that's when I saw the knife. It was small, just a folding knife, the blade no longer than my index finger, but it was coated in something dark and wet. I took a step back. "Hey, what happened? Are you hurt?" I tried to stop them, he whispered. I tried, but they wouldn't listen. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Who wouldn't listen? "The ones who were here," he said, his voice breaking. "The ones who were screaming." I looked around. The hollow was empty. Just trees and shadows. No signs of anyone else. No signs of a struggle. I took another step back, forcing myself to stay calm. "Are you alone?" He blinked, his eyes rolling toward the ground. "They said they'd come back," he mumbled. "They said they'd come back for me." The knife slipped from his hand, landing in the mud with a wet thud. I took another step back, every instinct screaming at me to run. But something about the way he was staring at the ground, his shoulders hunched, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps, something about it made me stay. "Listen," I said, my voice low, soothing. "Why don't you come with me? We can get you some help, maybe call the cops." His head snapped up, his eyes locking onto mine, and that's when he started to smile. It was a slow, creeping smile, his lips pulling back, his gums slick and bleeding. They said they'd come back, he said again, his voice sing-song, like he was reacting a nursery rhyme. They said they'd come back for me, and now they're gonna come back for you. I got out of there. I didn't look back. I didn't stop running until I was out of the hollow and back on the main trail. I kept running until I saw the roof of the ranger station peeking through the trees. When I got there, I tried to explain what had happened, told the ranger about the man, about the knife, about what he said. The ranger grabbed his radio, called it in, asked me to wait inside while he and another ranger headed back out toward the hollow. I sat there, staring at my muddy boots, feeling the sweat cool against my skin. It was almost dark now, the shadows stretching long and thin across the floor. When the ranger finally came back, he was alone. We didn't find anyone, he said. What do you mean? I asked. He was right there, sitting against the tree. The ranger shook his head. We found the tree and the knife, but no man. I felt sick. What about the blood? Did you find any blood? The ranger's face tightened. No, no blood, but the knife. I swallowed. What? It was covered in mud, he said, like it had been buried. No sign of anyone using it, and no sign of anyone being hurt. I tried to tell him what the man had said about the people screaming, about them coming back, but the ranger just shook his head. We'll keep an eye out, he said, but if you're smart, you'll stay out of those woods for a while. I nodded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the man was still out there, crouched in the hollow, waiting. I don't hike anymore, not since what happened last summer. I was staying at my uncle's cabin, deep in the woods. He'd offered to let me crash there for a couple of weeks to clear my head after a rough breakup. It was supposed to be peaceful, just me, the trees, and a few old hiking trails. The cabin itself was small, just one room with a creaky bed and a wood stove. No phone service, no Wi-Fi. The kind of place where the quiet gets inside your head. On my third day there, I decided to go for a long hike. There was a trail that wound through the pines and looped back around to the cabin. It was about 6 miles, mostly flat, and I'd done it a couple of times before. The air was heavy, the sky dark with clouds that threatened rain. The woods were thick, the trees pressed close together, branches hanging low enough to brush my shoulders. About 2 miles in, I felt it, like someone was watching me. It was that prickling sensation on the back of my neck, the kind that makes you keep glancing over your shoulder, even though you know no one's there. But this time, it was different. This time, it felt closer. I slowed down, listening. Nothing but the wind moving through the trees, the creak of branches swaying. I told myself it was just nerves, the isolation getting to me. But the feeling wouldn't go away. It just kept getting stronger. I kept walking. The path dipped into a shallow ravine, where the trees grew denser and the air felt colder. The wind had died down, and the silence was absolute. No birds, no insects, nothing. That's when I saw it. A man. He was standing about 50 feet ahead of me, right in the middle of the path. He was facing away from me, his back to me, head slightly tilted down. He wasn't moving, just standing there perfectly still. I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart slamming against my chest. Hey, I said, my voice too loud in the quiet. You okay? No response. I swallowed, took a shaky step forward. Do you need help? He still didn't move. I couldn't see his face, but something about his posture was wrong. His arms hung limp at his sides, shoulders slouched, head slightly cocked like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. I glanced around. The woods were empty, just me and him. Hey, I said again, my voice trembling. "Are you lost?" Slowly, he tilted his head, not to look at me, but to look up at the trees. His neck bent back, further than it should have, his face tilting toward the canopy. I couldn't see his eyes, just his mouth, and his mouth was open, wide open, like he was screaming, but no sound was coming out. My hands started to shake, my legs felt rooted to the ground. I wanted to turn around to run, but I couldn't move. Then, without warning, he dropped his head back down, his face still turned away from me, and he took a step forward, not toward me, but to the side, off the path. He started walking into the trees, his movements stiff and jerky, his arms still hanging at his sides. He moved like a puppet, like someone was pulling his strings. I watched him go, my heart hammering, every instinct screaming at me to run, but I couldn't. And then he stopped. About 20 feet off the trail, he stopped, and he turned. But he didn't look at me. He looked up again, at the trees, and then he opened his mouth. This time, he did scream, but it was wrong, too high-pitched, like the wail of an animal caught in a trap. It echoed through the woods, bouncing off the trees, distorting, growing louder. I turned and ran. I sprinted back up the path, my feet pounding against the dirt, branches whipping against my arms. I could still hear him screaming behind me, that awful, keening sound that didn't sound human. When I reached the top of the ravine, the screaming stopped. I kept running, my lungs burning, my legs shaking. I didn't stop until I was back at the cabin, slamming the door behind me, locking it, shoving the table in front of it. I stood there, gasping for breath, ears straining for any sound outside, but there was nothing, just silence. For the next few hours, I sat on the floor with a kitchen knife, staring at the window. I kept expecting to see him standing there, staring in at me with that awful, open mouth, but he never came. When the sun rose, I packed my bag and got out of there. I didn't tell my uncle why, I just said I needed to go home. I tried looking up missing persons reports for that area, but there was nothing, no one matching his description, no reports of a man screaming in the woods. I never went back to that trail. I wasn't supposed to be out there that late. The park closed at sunset, but I lost track of time. I was wandering one of the lesser used trails, the kind that snakes through the dense woods, where the trees grow too close and the underbrush is thick enough to hide anything. It was the kind of trail that made you feel like you were the only person in the world, or the only person who should be there. By the time I realised how dark it had gotten, the sky was a deep, inky blue, the kind of blue that swallows light and sound. I fumbled for my phone, but of course, the battery was dead. I swore under my breath and started back the way I'd come, my steps quick and loud against the fallen leaves. I wasn't running, but I wasn't exactly walking either. That's when I saw the smoke. It was rising through the trees, wispy and thin, coming from somewhere just off the path. At first, I thought it was a campfire, but it didn't smell like wood smoke. It smelled sweet and sickly, like burnt plastic or something rotten. I should have kept walking, I knew that, but I was curious and stupid, and I was tired of feeling like I was the only person out there. So, I stepped off the path and started toward the smoke. The trees were packed close, branches scraping against my arms, the ground uneven and littered with fallen branches. The further I went, the thicker the air became, like the smoke was getting low to the ground. It clung to my skin, greasy and foul, and the deeper I breathed, the heavier it felt in my lungs. Then I saw them. 2 figures standing in a small clearing, their backs to me. They were both tall, both facing a small fire that was smouldering in a pit dug into the earth. The fire wasn't big, just enough to to send the awful smelling smoke curling up into the air. And the figures, they weren't moving, just standing there, shoulder to shoulder, staring down at the fire. I opened my mouth to call out, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the way they were standing, perfectly still, perfectly rigid, almost like they were carved out of wood. I took a step closer, and a branch snapped under my foot. Both of them twitched. Neither of them turned around though. The air felt thick, heavy, pressing down on me from all sides. I swallowed and forced myself to take another step. "Hey," I said, my voice thin and tight. "Are you guys alright?" The two figures didn't move, didn't speak. They just kept staring down at the fire, as if they couldn't hear me, or as if they were waiting for something. Then one of them twitched again, a slight, jerky movement. His head rolled to the side, his neck twisting at an unnatural angle, and for a second I could see his face in profile. His eyes were open, and his mouth was moving. I couldn't hear what he was saying, if he was saying anything at all, but his lips were moving fast, soundlessly, like he was repeating the same word over and over. I took a step back, my foot hitting a root and sending me stumbling. The sound was loud, echoing through the clearing, and both figures went still, dead still. Then, in perfect unison, they both turned to face me. My stomach dropped. They were older than I'd expected. Both men, both gaunt and pale, their eyes sunken and dark. But their eyes weren't looking at me. They were looking past me. I didn't want to turn around, but I did. The trees were empty. The trail was empty. There was nothing behind me but shadows. I looked back at them. The two men hadn't moved. They were still staring past me, their mouths still moving, whispering those silent words. Then the one on the right stepped forward. I took another step back, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it. He took another step, and then another, and the closer he got, the worse he smelled. That same rotten, burnt plastic stench, so strong, it made my eyes water. "Hey," I said, my voice shaking. I didn't mean to bother you." The man stopped. His face was inches from mine, his eyes still staring past me, his mouth still moving, faster now, his lips dry and cracked. Then he stopped talking, and he smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It was too wide, too toothy, his gums pale and slick. Behind him, the other man hadn't moved. He was still standing by the fire, still whispering, still staring past me. The man in front of me leaned in, his breath hot and rancid against my face. And then he said it. "They told me you'd come." I felt my insides twist. "What?" "They said you'd come," he said, his eyes rolling back, his pupils vanishing into the whites. "They said you'd be the last one." Then he reached for me. I don't remember how I got back to the trail or how I found my way to the cabin, but I do remember locking the door and sinking to the floor, my whole body shaking. For hours I sat there, expecting them two men to come for me, but they never did. I never told anyone what happened. I still hike sometimes, but I stay on the main trails now, and every now and then, when the wind shifts, I catch a whiff of that sickly, burning smell.